My name is Dr. Alice Farrow. I'm a mother of 8 children and grandmother of 5 grandsons. I wrote a letter in response to the civil unrest, as well as to give a tribute to Mr. George Floyd at the Martin Luther King Family Center event, which included a painting of a mural in recognition of the injustices that so many people of color experience at the hands of police officers. The letter is written to the city, it's written to the nation, it's written to the world, and it is written from the depths of my heart as I prayed and asked for wisdom in the construction of this letter. As our regional Bishop Leroy Grenaway of the Church of God of Prophecy said to me recently, every evil system has a divine limitation. There will come a day when our conversations about thriving and reaching our maximum potential will not be shrouded by clouds of conversations that focuses on teaching about ethnic genocide and ethnic education of how to survive as a black child, a black man, or a black woman. There will come a time when our sharing and discussing of our children's dreams will not be preceded or followed by descriptive nightmares associated with police brutality, overt and covert discriminatory practices, institutional racism, and structural and systemic oppression or biases or prejudices in employment and housing, and inequities in child welfare and social services systems, and overall social, economic, cultural, and political structures. There will come a time when our blackness and the various shades that we are born in will not dictate the quality of treatment by police officers, providers in the medical community, in healthcare, or the level of respect and dignity that we can expect to receive in boardrooms, in grocery stores, K through 12, and in the institutions of higher education. There will come a time when the degrees to which we have access to basic needs and life-sustaining resources, including the oxygen that Mr. George Floyd was deprived of on that tragic day, will not be limited because of the color of our skin, our accents, or the languages we speak. There will come a time when our children will not need to ask us questions like, what's wrong with black people? Why do they hate us so much? A time when they will not have to ask that. A time when they will not have to ask, Mom, is there ethnic education to teach black children how to survive? A time when our children will not have to say, I feel anxious when a police car is pulling up behind me, wondering if they're going to pull me over and if this is going to be my last day on earth. When our children will not need to say, I know what to do when a police officer pulls me over. I know what to do. I know all the steps to follow based on what you and Dad taught me. But my problem is, why do black men have to go through so much? There will come a time when the conversation will shift to discussions that transcends this time period. This day will come as long as we stand in solidarity against every law, policy, procedure, and practices that promote and sustain institutional racism, structural and systemic oppression, disparities and inequities and injustices across systems, including but not limited to institutions and systems of policing, education, housing, employment, healthcare, mental health, and substance-related care systems, and child welfare. It will come when all branches of government are challenged and held accountable for their actions and inactivity to address the injustices forced on people of color. It will come as long as we increase our understanding of the complexities of the impact historical, physical, and psychological slavery has had and continues to have on people of color. The time will come when we no longer remain silent or invisible when injustice is being experienced by others. It will become a reality when we begin to fully understand Dr. Martin Luther King when he stated that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. It will also come when we recognize that no one in power willingly gives power over or begin to think about sharing power without a collective advocacy effort that is strategic, tactical, and multidimensional. Disrupting and dismantling institutions that are part of the cornerstones and foundation as well as a nation's structure and infrastructure takes a concerted, collective, relentless, intentional effort by us and our allies and those who would stand with us in the position of advocacy. Community, national, global awareness through nonviolent protests and marches combined with intensive and comprehensive education on advocacy, negotiation and communication along with education on our history presented to all children and adults along with voter education and registration year-round are critical. Holding ongoing community cafe meetings with diverse stakeholder groups with all the issues on the table, bringing different perspectives and cultivating and brokering consensus also essential to the dismantling process. This dismantling process, it requires us to demand of all systems, institutions, universities and colleges, profit and non-profit businesses, faith institutions, grassroots and traditional organizations to be actively involved in this dismantling of institutional racism and systemic oppression. Ensuring that no decision that impact us are made without us being at the table is absolutely critical, and developing tight operating system that allow us to know when meetings are established so that we can influence and co-create agendas where decisions are being made about policies and practices and allocation of resources among other issues are essential. And I will repeat that. Ensuring that no decision that impact us are made without us being at the table is absolutely critical, and developing tight operating systems allow us to know when meetings are established so that we can influence and co-create agendas where decisions are being made about policies and practices and allocation of resources among other issues are essential. This dismantling of the institutions with their policies and practices that sustain the disparities that are experienced by people of color will happen. It will happen when we begin to see ourselves as our brother's keepers, moving us to weep and grieve with them when they experience sorrow, and sing and laugh and dance with them when they experience joy. When we come alongside our brothers and sisters in solidarity, and when we say we are in this together, we will succeed and we will be victorious and we will triumph and we will overcome because we are standing together. No division, distortion, or discord, but standing together with the purpose of equity for people of color who has sustained the historical ravaging of our bodies, of our minds, of our intellect, our emotions, and of our overall well-being. We will no longer stand the raping of the richness embodied in each of us. No evil system continues forever. It will fall. We understand when we understand our economic power and our intellectual prowess and our spiritual strength and our creativity. When we understand our passion and the resilience that precedes us and extend back to our ancestors who were ravaged and enslaved and brought from the motherland, it will fall. This racist system will be dismantled when we as a collective group take charge of the narrative of our history, and when we resist embracing historical amnesia, as many of the books seem to promote about our people. It will be dismantled when we take the education of our children on to include success, the power, creativity, intellect, and richness of our ancestors as they built civilizations and governed nations before the diabolical, dehumanizing, transatlantic slave trade and law established and supported segregation, the Jim Crow system. I will end here with two statements. Justice for Mr. George Floyd and all whose name we say when we proclaim, say their name. And quoting Micah chapter 6 verse 8. He has shown you, O mankind, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. This is the letter to us, to our city, to our nation, and to the world. From a mother who has 8 children and 5 grandsons, all with different hues. My hope is that everyone that hears the reading of this letter, that you will take a position to stand for justice and equity for people of color, and you will take a position that of allies or advocate, and you will take the position that you will not stand by and watch as injustice is carried out on particular people group. My hope is that you will take this opportunity where we have civil unrest in the nation and globally to stop and think about whether you are contributing with your direct comments, your actions, your belief that you transmit to your children, or whether you are combating this evil, wicked tool called institutional racism and structural and systemic oppression that has been used for so many centuries against people of color. I challenge you to decide to become involved in the various ways that I already expressed in the beginning of this letter. There is so much that can be done in a relatively short period of time. It will not take centuries. It will not take an inordinate amount of time for us to bring justice to us as people of color if everyone make a decision that we are of the human race. We are not less than any other human being. We are part of the human race. We stand with our intellect, we stand with our emotions, we stand with our knowledge, we stand with our skills, we stand within the authority that has been given to us by God Himself to be divinely created and to know that we are equal and not less than. It is absolutely necessary that everyone hearing my voice understand that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, according to Dr. Martin Luther King. And as we have seen over and over and over and over and over and over again. The rules of engagement has changed. Going forward, the rules of engagement has changed. I speak in terms of the future as well as the present. We will engage with one another in a way that command that respect and dignity be provided to every one of us. We are not less than any other person. We hurt, we love, we play, we live, we walk, we sing, we dance, we write, we draw, we paint, we have discussions at the kitchen table, we have our spiritual beliefs, we walk with one another to the store, we ride on the bus, we drive Mercedes. We drive Jaguars. We drive Chevy. We drive all the various cars that's out there. And we walk the streets. We walk around the blocks. We walk in our neighborhoods. We walk in our community stores. We walk to the corner store. We walk, and we walk. You know, we also run. We run and we jog. We run down the street to catch the bus. We jog because we're concerned about our health, just like everyone else. We run because we want to run and lose weight. We run because we are concerned about obesity, just like everyone else. We run because we want to feel the wind blowing against our skin. And we run because we want to feel the sun shining down on us. We run because we enjoy running. We enjoy the natural air around us. We enjoy experiencing people running by us and walking by us and the cars driving by us. We run because we are human beings and we can run. We run because we can. And when we run, we're thinking sometimes about what we want to cook tonight. Sometimes we're thinking about what homework our children have. Sometimes we're thinking about our husbands. We're thinking about all the things that need to be done at work. We're thinking just like everyone else. And do you know what? Sometimes we're singing. We're singing praises. We're worshiping our God. Sometimes we're singing raps. Sometimes we're spitting out words. Sometimes we're just enjoying the music that we're listening to. But sometimes we are creating the lyrics to the music that we will make arrangements to when we get back home. We run because we can run. Do you know that sometimes we just sit silently? We sit silently and we contemplate the works of our hands. We sit silently and we think about our ancestors and what they've done and how far they brought themselves and where we are in this moment in time. Sometimes we even stop and just think about nothing. Just being present in the moment, existing. And sometimes we think about Dr. Martin Luther King. We think about our neighbor who organized the rally. Or we think about our children who are in universities or colleges or in the workplace or in the military. We think about their lives. Sometimes we wonder why do they hate us so much? Sometimes we wonder why they are fearful of us. And when I say they, I'm referring to anyone who will uphold institutional racism and systemic oppression of a people, of a race, of the people of color. Do you know something else? Sometimes our children are studying economics, engineer, chemical engineer, mechanical engineer, civil engineer. They are studying to be professors, to be doctors, to be lawyers. They are studying to be part of the trade environment and industry. They are studying to contribute to the sciences, to the math. If you're thinking about mathematicians, they are studying to do art and to be creative with their display of their expressions as they're envisioning their world and their encounters in this world. Do you know what else? Often often they're creating comic books and they're thinking of various scenarios to create movie scenes and scripts, and often they're thinking about the philosophers that we are always asked to read about in the various colleges and universities, and they're beginning to think about how they can contribute to the literature, to those other books that's already in existence. They're thinking, how can we put and pay it forward for the next generation? And they're thinking, sometimes just thinking about what this world would be like if there was justice for all of us. What would this world be like? And how much more advanced would this world be if people of color would be given the education that they deserve rightfully, with all the resources, with all of what is needed to have a quality education? What would it be like if during this pandemic that every student that is dealing and doing distance learning had access to the technology that they need, not just the device, but also access to internet without there being an interruption of service where they're kicked off of the internet when they're in the middle of a class session? People of color experience this often. The research is already starting to come out and show the disparities that individuals and students of color in various schools are already experiencing because of the, you know what it is, the underlying conditions of the schools and what is sustaining the inequities within schools, that children of color do not have the same access, the same quality, the same level of expectations, the same standards, but rather they are experiencing the disparate treatment that is not too unfamiliar. Even when we look at the juvenile justice system and see the disparate piece there. And I'm not going to retake that. I'm simply speaking from my heart. Over 30 years, work has been captured. And we're still seeing the overrepresentation of minority youth in the juvenile justice system. We're still seeing the extensive sentencing and the lack of justice in that whole sentencing structure for people of color versus non-people of color. When we look at healthcare and the mental health system, whether you're looking at the mental health, the substance use treatment, looking at the disparities, looking at access, looking at quality, looking at continuity of care, looking at all of these pieces. How can a system of people that is supposed to be governed by the people, how can that system tolerate the ongoing disparities across systems itself? How can it see that when you think about health, just looking at data that comes out from various institutions, when you look at heart attacks, when you look at, yes, the cardiovascular disease, when you look at strokes, when you look at diabetes, when you look at blood pressure, when you look at asthma and respiratory issues, how can a population group have all of it having the heaviest burden? You cannot convince me that this is not institutionalized. You cannot convince me that this is not being sustained. And I'm not speaking about it being sustained just by the individual acts. the family of origin, shaping and socialization of their children to go forth and promulgate or implement all that they have been trained in terms of the way to look at people of color. I'm speaking about policies and practices and laws that sustain this type of treatment of people of color. You cannot convince me that is not diabolical, evil, wicked. You can't convince me that is not deliberate. But I'm telling you that the rules of engagement has changed. We will no longer be ravaged. We will no longer be tolerant of the disrespect and the devaluing that we experience in boardrooms and in classrooms, in grocery stores when we're followed around, or when we're being pulled over by officers, or when we go into the medical community and begin to speak of our concerns, and we are considered in many instances when we're discussing anything that has to do with pain, and often, too often, the disbelief of us or the expectation that we should suffer through a great deal of pain without any kind of relief. There is so much hideous and insidious actions that are spurned by the attitudes and the beliefs of so many people in our society. But right now we're in a place where the public health issue is with COVID-19 is intersecting with the disparities in education, with the distance learning, with the social justice, equity-related unrest matters, with the death of what is called now the murder of Mr. George Floyd. This intersection has allowed so many of us to begin to speak up, to be heard, to become visible, to be able to articulate our feelings, our emotions, our hopes, and our dreams, and to let everyone in our cities, in our nation, and around the world know that we expect a change. We expect a change, and we will be part of that change process. No decision for us without us. That has been said many times in many different circles. So I'm not saying anything that has not been said out there. I'm just integrating it here to emphasize that piece. That I'm calling all of us to look and reflect internally to see what we can do in this fight against institutional racism, systemic, structural oppression. Now, I am hopeful. I am hopeful. I am hopeful. Because of something my daughter wrote a while back, actually last Thursday. One of them wrote about our ancestors in wondering what made them be resilient and push through and carry through. And she ended it with, they were thinking of us, their children, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren, and so on. I'm hopeful because another daughter wrote last Thursday questioning where is the America that is supposed to be good, where we're supposed to have equal treatment, and where she challenged us in saying, where is it, and how can we continue in this space where we get a little rights, a little bit of education, but our skin complexion is speaking to others in a language that says in compliance. If our complexion is speaking a language that says in compliance, you and all of you who are promoting institutional racism and structural and systemic oppression will continue to think that you need to bring us into compliance. I am hopeful because it's not just young people and not just older people who are coming against this institution now. But it's a combination of generations together, standing in solidarity, moving toward that space. Some of us are thinking we ought to do this and ought to do that, and we ought to do this and ought to do that. But we're coming together to have conversations. I'm hopeful because as a colleague of mine emailed me yesterday, said to me, you know, he was referring to President Obama, and then he was referring to reading a book, and he mentioned that there was a realization that there are more people joining this fight that are not of people of color and who are joining the fight than there were in the 60s. I am hopeful that we are going to make the difference together. I am hopeful because children and family members, colleagues and friends are all sharing that they're ready to do the hard work of having the conversations. They are ready to come alongside and support us in this fight. I'm thinking of an email that I got the other day, and this particular principal ended it in saying, in solidarity, and place his name in the email, letting me know that he's ready to do much more than he has done in the past and willing to learn and to share. I'm hopeful because I am in this fight. But you know why I'm most hopeful? Because I am a believer in Jesus Christ, and I am a child of the Most High God, and I trust God to execute justice in the land. And I trust God to give us the wisdom that we need in this day and time to mobilize and to organize and to be very strategic in what we need to do to move what is seemingly, and I said seemingly, an insurmountable mountain. I trust God to hear our prayers and our cries. I trust God to go before us, to lead us in this fight. I trust my God and my Father. And that is why I'm most hopeful. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my sharing of my letter to us, to the city, to the nation, and to those that are across the international waters. I am trusting God. And I end this letter by thanking my Savior, Jesus Christ, for this opportunity to speak to the world. Let's do this together. Let's work together to take out every law, every policy, every procedure, and every practice that sustain institutional racism, structural and systemic oppression, and that keeps the disparities growing and being so heavy on people of color. Thank you. As we fight together, I'll end with this. Combined, the nonviolent protests with many other strategies. There's so many strategies that we can use. It's multidimensional. It's multifaceted. We can do this together. We can do this together. We must do this together. We must do this together. Thank you.